The station was always cold. That was the first thing Taiho had learned when he started working on Earth Orbital Station 7 5 years ago. The heating systems were old and broken in most areas. The good parts of the station, where the rich aliens walked and traded, those were warm. But the lower decks where humans worked, those were freezing. Taiho pulled his coat tighter around his body as he walked through the narrow corridor. His shift had just ended. 14 hours of lifting boxes, moving cargo, and being yelled at by alien merchants who thought humans were stupid animals. His back hurt. His hands were rough and cracked. But he had earned enough credits to send money to his sister Hannah back on Earth. That was all that mattered. The coat he wore was old. Very old. The brown fabric was faded in many places, and there were patches sewn onto the elbows and shoulders. His mother had made this coat for him when he was 13 years old. She had saved money for months to buy the thermal fabric. She had stayed up late many nights to sew it perfectly. 3 months after she gave it to him, she got sick. 2 months after that, she was gone. Taiho never bought a new coat. He just kept fixing this one. Every patch, every stitch, was a memory. When he wore it, he felt like his mother was still hugging him. The corridor ahead was dark. This was the maintenance section, a place most workers avoided. The lights here only worked sometimes, and the heating never worked at all. Taiho usually took the longer path, but tonight he was too tired. He just wanted to get to his sleeping quarters and rest. That was when he saw her. A woman sat alone against the metal wall. She was not human. Her skin had a soft blue color, like the sky on a clear morning. Her hair was silver and long, falling past her shoulders. She wore thin robes made of some shiny material that looked expensive but completely useless against the cold. She was shivering. Her arms were wrapped around herself, and her breath came out in small white clouds. Taiho stopped walking. He looked at her for a moment. She was clearly not from the lower decks. Everything about her screamed wealth and status. But she was alone here, in the coldest part of the station, with no protection from the freezing air. Other workers passed by. Some looked at her and laughed quietly. One man made a rude comment about aliens being stupid. Nobody stopped. Nobody helped. Why would they? The aliens never helped humans. They treated humans like servants, like lesser beings. Why should humans care about them? But Taiho could not just walk away. He did not think about politics or history or the unfair treatment humans received every day. He just saw a person who was cold. That was simple. That was easy to understand. He walked toward her. The woman looked up, and her eyes widened. They were strange eyes, purple like flowers, with no visible pupils. Taiho had never seen eyes like that before. They were beautiful, but also very sad. "You will get sick," Taiho said. His voice was rough from tiredness. "It is too cold here." The woman did not answer. She just stared at him like he was some strange creature she had never seen before. Taiho sighed. He reached up and began to unbutton his coat. The cold immediately bit into his chest through his thin work shirt, but he ignored it. He pulled the coat off his shoulders and stepped closer to the woman. She flinched. Her whole body tensed like she expected him to attack her. Taiho paused. Then, slowly and gently, he draped the coat over her shoulders. The old brown fabric looked strange against her shiny robes, but it was warm. He could see the surprise on her face as the heat touched her skin. "Keep it," Taiho said simply. "You need it more than me." The woman opened her mouth, but no words came out. She just stared at him with those purple eyes, and Taiho saw something change in them. The coldness that had been there before, a kind of wall, seemed to crack just a little. Taiho nodded once, then turned and walked away. The cold was already making him shake, but he would survive. His quarters were not far. He had blankets there. He would be fine. Behind him, the woman clutched the coat with trembling fingers. She pulled it tighter around herself, and something strange happened. She could feel something coming from the fabric. It was not just physical warmth. There was something else. Something deeper. Her people called it genshim, soul warmth. It was the emotional energy that living beings act on objects they cared about deeply. Most species left only tiny traces, barely noticeable. But this coat was different. This coat was alive with Genshin. She could feel love. Deep, powerful love from a mother to her son. She could feel years of struggle, of hard work, of loneliness. She could feel kindness that expected nothing in return. She could feel the soul of the man who had just walked away. Yuna had lived for over 200 years. She was the fourth imperial daughter of the Valen Empire, which ruled over 40,000 worlds. She had received gifts from kings and queens, from generals and merchants. She had been given jewels worth more than entire planets. She had been offered everything the galaxy could provide, but she had never received anything like this. This coat, this old, patched, faded coat, was the most valuable thing anyone had ever given her, because the man who gave it did not know who she was. He did not want anything from her. He simply saw someone who was cold, and he helped. Yuna watched him disappear into the darkness of the corridor. She tried to remember the last time someone had shown her kindness without wanting something in return. She could not remember. Maybe it had never happened. She pressed the coat against her face and breathed in. It smelled like metal and sweat and something warm and human. Tears formed in her eyes, but she did not let them fall. Princesses did not cry. That was what she had been taught. But sitting alone in that cold corridor, wrapped in a stranger's coat, Yuna felt something she had not felt in a very long time. She felt hope. Somewhere in the station, Taiho reached his small room and collapsed onto his bed. He was already shivering badly, and he knew he would probably get sick. Hannah would scold him if she found out. She always told him he was too kind for his own good, but he did not regret it. The woman had looked so cold, so alone. How could he just walk away? He closed his eyes and thought about his mother. She had always told him that kindness was the only wealth that poor people had. We cannot give money, she would say, but we can give warmth. We can give care. That is more valuable than gold. Taiho smiled as sleep took him. He did not know that his simple act of kindness would change the fate of humanity forever. He did not know that the woman he had helped was one of the most powerful people in the galaxy. He did not know that his mother's old coat would touch the heart of an empire. He was just a tired man who had helped someone in need. And sometimes, that is enough to change everything. The Imperial warship Eternal Dawn floated silently in the darkness of space, hidden behind Earth's moon. It was a massive ship, larger than most human cities. Its hull was made of metal that seemed to drink in light, making it nearly invisible against the black sky. Inside, over 50,000 crew members worked day and night to keep the ship running. But today, all attention was focused on one person. Yuna walked through the grand halls of the ship. Still wearing the old brown coat over her ceremonial robes, her attendants followed behind her, their faces showing horror and confusion. The coat was dirty. It was patched and faded. It was a human thing, and humans were considered barely more than animals by most of the galaxy. But Yuna refused to take it off. Admiral Kira was waiting for her in the command center. She was a tall woman with sharp features and silver hair cut short like a soldier. Her uniform was perfect, her posture straight, her eyes cold. She had served the imperial family for over 100 years, and she had never seen anything like this. "Your Highness," Kira said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "What happened down there? You were supposed to observe the humans secretly. You were not supposed to make contact." Yuna sat down in her chair, the coat still wrapped around her shoulders. "I was testing them," she said simply. "I wanted to see how they would react to someone weak and vulnerable, and most of them ignored me. Some laughed. One tried to steal the rings hidden under my robes." Yuna's eyes grew distant, remembering. But then one of them did something unexpected. She told Kira about Taiho, about the coat, about the Genshin she had felt radiating from the old fabric. Kira listened in silence. When Yuna finished, the Admiral shook her head slowly. "He was stupid," she said. "Giving away his only protection against the cold? That is not kindness. That is foolishness, is it?" Yuna looked at the Admiral with those purple eyes. "When was the last time you did something for a stranger, expecting nothing in return?" Kira had no answer. Yuna stood up and walked to the window. The Earth floated below, blue and green and white. Such a small planet. Such a young species. The Valen Empire had been watching humans for 80 years, ever since they first left their world. They were trying to decide what to do with them. Some wanted to make them slaves. Some wanted to destroy them before they became a threat. Some wanted to protect them and study their unusual culture. Yuna had come here to make that decision. She had been testing humanity, looking for their true nature. And now she had found something she did not expect. "Find him," she said quietly. Kira stepped forward. "Your Highness?" "The human who gave me this coat." "Find him. I want to know everything about him." The Admiral wanted to argue, but she knew better. When Princess Yuna made a decision, nothing could change her mind. She bowed and left to give the orders. Within 3 hours, the Imperial Intelligence team had found Taiho. They accessed the station's records, watched security footage, and gathered every piece of information they could find. Yuna sat alone in her quarters, reading the report on a glowing screen. His name was Taiho. He was 28 years old. He had been born on Earth in a small town near the southern coast. His father had died before he was born. His mother had raised him alone until she died when he was 13. After that, he had taken care of his younger sister Hannah by himself. He had no education, no special skills. He worked 14 hours a day at the station, doing jobs that aliens considered too dirty or dangerous. He earned barely enough to survive. But he sent most of his money to his sister on Earth so she could go to school. Yuna looked at the images of his life. His tiny apartment on the station, the small bed, the single chair, the pictures of his mother and sister on the wall. He owned almost nothing. The coat had been one of his only possessions, and he had given it away to a stranger. One image caught her attention. It was a close look at the coat before she had put it on. There was a patch on the inside, near the heart. Someone had sewn it there with uneven stitches, clearly made by unpracticed hands. But the thread was colorful, and the pattern was a simple flower. The records showed that Taiho's mother had made this patch on the night. Before she went to the hospital for the last time, it was her final gift to him. "Why?" Yuna turned off the screen and sat in darkness. She ran her fingers over the patch, feeling the rough thread under her fingertips. This man had given away his mother's last gift to a complete stranger. He had given away a piece of his soul. Why? That question burned in her mind. In her world, everything had a price. Every gift was a transaction. Every kindness was a negotiation. She had learned this from childhood. Trust no one. Accept nothing without knowing the cost. But Taiho had broken all those rules. He had given the most valuable thing he owned, and he had walked away. He had not even asked for her name. Meanwhile, on the station, Taiho was sick. The fever had come quickly after he reached his room. By morning, he could barely stand. His whole body shook with chills, and his throat burned like fire. He had been right about getting sick. His communicator buzzed with a message from Hannah. He answered weakly, trying to hide how bad he felt. "You sound terrible." Hannah's voice came through the speaker, sharp with concern. She was 19 now, studying alien languages at the university in Seoul. She was smart, much smarter than him. He was so proud of her. "Just tired," he lied. "Long shift. You gave away your coat again, didn't you?" Taiho was silent.
"I knew it."
Hannah's voice was a mixture of anger and love. "What happened this time? A homeless person? A child? A stray animal?" "An alien," Taiho admitted. She looked cold. "An alien." Hannah was quiet for a moment. "The same aliens who treat us like dirt? Those aliens?" "She was just a person, Hannah. A person who was cold." Hannah sighed, and Taiho could imagine her shaking her head on the other side. "You are impossible. You know that? Mom's coat? The one thing you refused to ever let go of, and you just gave it to some random alien? She needed it. You need it too, you idiot." But even as she scolded him, Taiho could hear the love in her voice. She understood, even if she did not agree. They were their mother's children, both of them. Kindness was in their blood, Hannah finally said, her voice softening. "Drink water. Take medicine. I will call you tomorrow, okay, in Taiho? I love you. Even when you are being stupid, I love you too, Hannah. He ended the call and closed his eyes. The fever made his thoughts swim, but he did not regret what he had done. He hoped the woman was warm now. He hoped she was safe. High above in the hidden warship, Yuna was watching him. A small drone had placed a camera near his window. She could see him lying in his bed, sick and alone. She should not care. He was just a human, one of billions. His life meant nothing in the scale of the Empire, but she could not look away. She touched the coat again, feeling his warmth, his mother's love, his simple kindness. And for the first time in decades, Princess Yuna of the Valen Empire made a decision based not on politics or strategy, but on her heart. She would meet this human again. She would understand why he had touched her soul so deeply, and perhaps in doing so, she would remember what it meant to be truly alive. 3 days after Taiho gave away his coat, the world changed. It started with a signal. A transmission came from deep space, directed at Earth's united government. The message was simple and clear. The Valen Empire requested a formal diplomatic meeting. This had never happened before. In 80 years of contact with alien species, no major power had ever shown interest in talking to humanity as equals. The news spread across the planet within hours. People watched their screens with hope and fear. The Valen Empire was the largest power in the known galaxy. They controlled 40,000 worlds. Their technology was so advanced that it seemed like magic to humans. One decision from them could lift humanity to the stars or crush them into nothing. Earth's leaders gathered in the United Government Hall in New Geneva. Presidents and prime ministers, generals and scientists, all of them trying to understand what was happening. Why now? Why did the Empire suddenly care about Earth? Then came the second part of the message. The Empire had one condition for the meeting. They wanted a specific human to attend. His name was Taiho. When the government agents arrived at the orbital station, Taiho thought he was in trouble. Maybe he had broken some rule he did not know about. Maybe the alien woman had reported him for touching her without permission. He stood nervously in his small room as 3 men in dark suits explained the situation. You want me to go to a diplomatic meeting? Taiho repeated. Sure, he had heard wrong. Me. I am just a cargo worker. The Empire was very specific, one of the agents said. They want you and only you. They did not explain why. Taiho thought about the woman he had helped 3 days ago. Could this be connected? But that made no sense. She was just a person who had been cold. Why would the Empire care about that? He agreed to go, but he had one condition of his own. He wanted his sister Hannah to come with him. She was studying alien languages. She could help translate. She could help him understand what was happening. The government agreed. Within 12 hours, Hannah had arrived at the station, and together they boarded a shuttle heading to meet the Valen delegation. Hannah could not stop staring out the window as they flew away from Earth. She had dreamed of meeting aliens her whole life. She had studied their languages, their cultures, their histories, but she had never thought she would actually stand face to face with them. Are you okay? She asked Taiho, noticing how quiet he was. I think I made a mistake, he said softly. What kind of mistake? He told her about the woman, the cold corridor, the coat. As he spoke, Hannah's eyes grew wider and wider. You gave away Mom's coat? She grabbed his arm. To an alien? Taiho, that coat was everything to you? She was cold, he said simply, the same answer he always gave. Hannah wanted to scold him more, but then she saw the worry in his eyes. He was not scared for himself. He was scared that he had somehow caused trouble for humanity, that his simple act of kindness might have terrible consequences. She squeezed his hand. Whatever happens, we will face it together. The Valen diplomatic vessel was waiting for them in high orbit. It was beautiful in a way that made human ships look like toys. The hull was smooth and white, with lines of golden light running along its surface. When the shuttle docked and they stepped inside, Taiho felt like he had entered a dream. Everything was clean and bright. The floors were made of some material that felt soft under his feet. Strange music played quietly in the air, sad and beautiful at the same time. Servants in silver robes bowed as they passed. "They're bowing to us," Hannah whispered in amazement. Tahoe did not understand. Aliens never bowed to humans. Humans were the ones who bowed, who served, who followed orders. But here, on this ship, everything was different. They were led to a large room with high ceilings and wide windows showing the stars. At the far end of the room, there was a raised platform with a single chair. And sitting in that chair was the woman Tahoe had helped. But she looked different now. She was no longer shivering in the cold. She was no longer wearing thin robes. Now she sat tall and proud, dressed in armor made of crystal and gold. A crown of light floated above her silver hair. Her purple eyes shone with power that made Tahoe's legs weak. And over all of this royal splendor, she was still wearing his mother's old brown coat. "Welcome," she said, her voice filling the room. "My name is Yuna. I am the fourth imperial daughter of the Valen Empire." Hannah gasped and dropped to her knees. She pulled at Tahoe's arm, trying to make him bow too, but he was frozen in place. He could only stare at the woman, at his coat, at everything that did not make sense. "You," he finally said. "You were in the corridor. You were cold." Yuna smiled slightly. "Yes, I was testing your people. I wanted to see how humans would treat someone weak and helpless." She stood from her chair and walked toward him, the coat swaying with each step. "You were the only one who showed kindness." "I do not understand," Tahoe said. "Why does that matter? You are a princess. You have everything. I have everything except this." Yuna touched the coat. "In our culture, when someone gives another person an object filled with their ginsham, it's their soul warmth. It is the most sacred act possible. It is a bond deeper than marriage, deeper than blood." Tahoe's face went pale. "A bond? You did not know." Yuna's voice was gentle. "You could not know. But in the eyes of my people, you have offered me your soul. You have proposed a connection that cannot be broken." Hannah looked like she might faint. He proposed to a princess. My brother, the cargo worker, proposed to an imperial princess. "Not intentionally," Yuna said with a small smile. "But intention does not matter in these things. The Genshim speaks truth that words cannot hide." She stood directly in front of Tahoe now, close enough that he could see himself reflected in her purple eyes. She was beautiful, he realized. Beautiful and sad and somehow lonely, despite all her power. "I have a question for you," Yuna said, "and I need you to answer honestly." Tahoe nodded, not trusting his voice. "Do you want your coat back?" It was a simple question, but Tahoe understood that his answer would change everything. If he said yes, maybe all of this would end. Maybe he could go back to his normal life, moving cargo, sending money to Hannah, pretending this had never happened. But he looked at the coat on her shoulders. He saw how she held it close, like it was precious. He saw the loneliness in her eyes and realized that maybe she needed warmth just as much as she had needed it in that cold corridor. "No," he said quietly. "Keep it. It looks better on you anyway." The room fell completely silent. Hannah made a small, choking sound. Even the servant stopped moving. Yuna stared at him for a long moment. Then something strange happened. Her cold royal mask cracked just slightly. And underneath, Tahoe saw a young woman who had been alone for far too long. "Thank you," she whispered, so quietly that only he could hear. And in that moment, without understanding it fully, Tahoe knew that his life would never be the same again. He had touched the heart of an empire with nothing but kindness. Now he would have to face whatever came next. But looking at Yuna, at the hope in her eyes, he thought that maybe it would be worth it. The journey to the Valen throne world took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of traveling through space that seemed impossible to Tahoe's human eyes. The ship moved faster than light, bending the universe around it like folding a piece of paper. Stars stretched into lines of color, and whole galaxies passed by like distant clouds. Tahoe spent most of his time learning. Hannah had become something between a translator and a teacher, explaining everything she knew about Valen culture. But there was so much she did not know. The empire was ancient, thousands of years old, and its customs were complicated beyond anything humans had imagined. The Emperor has ruled for over 800 years, Hannah explained one day, reading from a data screen. He has 5 daughters and 3 sons. Yuna is the 4th daughter, which means she has almost no chance of becoming ruler. In their system, she exists mainly for political marriages. That sounds lonely, Taiho said. It sounds normal for royalty. Hannah looked at him with curious eyes. You really do not understand what you have done, do you? By giving her that coat, by letting her keep it, you have inserted yourself into one of the most powerful families in the galaxy. There are people who would kill for that position. Taiho was quiet. He had never wanted power or position. He just wanted to help people who were cold. News of the human soul bond spread across the Empire faster than their ship could travel. By the time they were halfway to the throne world, everyone knew the story. A primitive human had accidentally bonded with an imperial princess. Some laughed at the absurdity. Some were outraged at the insult to royal blood. Some saw opportunity. Yuna visited Taiho often during the journey. At first, she was formal and distant, asking polite questions about human culture. But slowly as the days passed, she began to relax. She told him about her life in the palace, about the sisters who hated her and the brothers who ignored her. She told him about centuries of loneliness, of being valued only for what she could provide to the Empire, never for who she was. I was taught that love is weakness, she said one night. Standing by the window of the ship's observation deck, my mother was killed by a rival faction when I was young because my father loved her too openly. After that, he became cold. We all became cold. Taiho stood beside her, looking at the stars. I am sorry, he said. That sounds terrible. It is normal. She said the words flatly, but Taiho heard the pain underneath. Princes and princesses are tools. We serve the Empire. We do not get to have feelings. Everyone has feelings, Taiho said, even princesses. She looked at him then, and her purple eyes were soft in a way he had never seen before. You really believe that, do you not? You believe that everyone deserves kindness, even people like me, especially people like you, he said quietly. You looked cold in that corridor. Not just your body, your heart. Yuna did not answer, but she moved a little closer to him. For a while, they just stood there together, watching the universe pass by. The first assassination attempt came on the 14th day. Taiho was sleeping in his quarters when the door exploded inward. 3 figures in black armor rushed inside, their weapons glowing with deadly light. Taiho barely had time to roll off his bed before energy blasts tore through where he had been lying. He was going to die. He knew it with complete certainty. He was no soldier. He had no weapons. He was just a cargo worker who had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. Then Yuna appeared. She moved like water, flowing between the attackers with impossible speed. Her hands glowed with blue fire, and everywhere she touched, the assassins fell. In less than 30 seconds, all 3 were on the ground, unconscious or dead. She stood in the doorway, breathing hard, her silver hair wild around her face. The old brown coat was wrapped around her shoulders, and somehow that made her look even more dangerous. Are you hurt? She asked, rushing to Taiho's side. No, I am fine. He was shaking, but he was alive. You saved me. Of course I did. She knelt beside him, her purple eyes scanning his body for injuries. You are under my protection now. No one touches what is mine. Taiho looked at her in the dim light, at this princess who had killed for him, and he felt something shift in his chest. He did not understand these alien customs. He did not understand soul bonds or galactic politics. But he understood this. Someone cared whether he lived or died. Someone other than Hannah, for the first time in many years. Thank you, he said softly. Yuna's expression softened. You thanked me once before in that corridor. I never answered properly. She reached out and touched his face gently with fingers that could kill. So thank you. For the coat, for the warmth, for seeing me when no one else did. After that night, the assassination attempts continued. There were 3 more in the final week of the journey. Each time, Yuna protected him. Each time, she grew more fierce, more determined. The attackers came from different factions, each with their own reasons for wanting Taiho dead. Some were noble families who did not want human blood mixing with royal. Some were political enemies of Yuna who wanted to hurt her. Some simply hated humans and could not accept that one had touched an imperial princess. Taiho learned to fight during those weeks. Not with weapons or powers, but with his mind. Hannah taught him protocol and politics. Yuna taught him about the different factions and their motivations. Admiral Kira, who Taiho discovered, was secretly proud of how Yuna had changed. Taught him about honor and duty. By the time they reached the throne world, Taiho was no longer the simple cargo worker who had given away his coat. He was still that man in his heart, but now he wore that kindness like armor. He understood that the galaxy was watching him, waiting to see if humanity was worthy of attention. The throne world was a planet covered entirely in white metal. Cities rose miles into the sky, connected by bridges of light. Ships moved between the towers like schools of fish. Everywhere Taiho looked, there was beauty and power and age beyond anything Earth had ever known. But there was also coldness. The people walked with their heads down. The servants bowed too deeply. The soldiers stood too stiff. This was a world of rules and fear, where kindness was weakness and love was danger. Taiho understood now why Yuna had been so shocked by his simple gift. In a world like this, giving without expecting anything in return was almost unthinkable. The night before his audience with the Emperor, Yuna came to his quarters. She wore simple clothes instead of her armor, and his mother's coat was draped over her shoulders as always. "Tomorrow will decide everything," she said, sitting across from him. "My father will judge you. He will judge humanity. What he decides could mean protection or destruction for your people. I know." Now Taiho had been thinking about nothing else for days. "Are you afraid?" Yes, he saw no point in lying. "But I was also afraid in that corridor when I saw you shivering. Fear does not stop me from doing what is right." Yuna was quiet for a moment. Then she asked the question that had been burning in her for weeks. "Why did you help me, really? Not the simple answer you give everyone else. The true reason." Taiho thought carefully before answering. "My mother used to say that kindness is the only wealth poor people have. We cannot give money or power, but we can give warmth. We can give care." He paused. "I think I helped you because helping others is the only way I know to keep my mother alive. When I am kind, I feel her with me. I feel like she is proud." Yuna's eyes glistened with tears she refused to let fall. "That is the most beautiful thing anyone has ever said to me. It's just the truth." She stood and walked to him, and for a long moment she simply looked at his face, at this strange human who had changed her entire world. "Tomorrow, whatever happens, know this." She took his hand in hers. "You have already touched the heart of this empire. You touched mine, and that can never be undone." Taiho squeezed her hand back. Tomorrow he would face an emperor who had ruled for 8 centuries. Tomorrow he would speak for all of humanity. Tomorrow, everything could end or begin. But tonight, in this quiet moment, he was just a man holding hands with a woman who had finally learned what warmth felt like. And that, he thought, was worth everything. The grand imperial throne chamber was the largest room Taiho had ever seen. It stretched so far that the walls disappeared into golden mist. Pillars of crystal rose toward a ceiling painted with stars and galaxies, showing the entire empire laid out in glowing light. 10,000 nobles stood in perfect rows, their faces cold and judging, their robes shining with wealth that could buy entire planets. And at the far end, on a throne that seemed carved from a dying sun, sat Emperor Shan. He was ancient. His skin was pale blue like Yuna's, but lined with 8 centuries of life. His eyes were deep purple, darker than his daughter's, and they held no warmth at all. He wore armor made of light itself, and a crown of black crystal floated above his silver hair. When Taiho entered the chamber, those eyes fixed on him like a predator watching prey. Taiho walked forward alone. Hannah had been forced to wait outside. Yuna stood with the other royals, forbidden from speaking. This was between Taiho and the Emperor, between humanity and the Empire. His footsteps echoed in the silence. 10,000 pairs of eyes followed him. He felt small, smaller than he had ever felt in his life. He was nothing compared to these beings. He was a speck of dust in a universe of giants. But he kept walking, thought of his mother, thought of Hannah, he thought of Yuna, standing somewhere in this crowd, still wearing his coat. He was not walking for himself. He was walking for everyone who had ever been called primitive, lesser, worthless. He stopped at the base of the throne and waited. Emperor Suhan did not speak at first. He simply looked at Taiho, studying him like a scientist studying an insect. The silence stretched on for minutes that felt like hours. Then finally, the emperor spoke. His voice was deep and old, echoing through the chamber like thunder from a distant storm. You are the human who touched my daughter. It was not a question, but Taiho answered anyway. Yes. You gave her an object filled with your soul warmth. In our culture, this is a proposal of the deepest bond possible. You have claimed connection to royal blood. The emperor's voice grew colder. Give me one reason why I should not destroy your world for this insult, the nobles murmured. Some laughed quietly. Others nodded in agreement. Here was the primitive human, standing before the master of 40,000 worlds, about to be crushed like the nothing he was. Taiho took a breath. He had no speech prepared. He had no grand words or political tricks. He only had the truth. I did not know who she was, he said, his voice steady, despite his fear. I saw a woman shivering in the cold. I saw someone who needed help. That was all I knew. That was all that mattered. Ignorance is no excuse, the emperor said. I am not asking for excuse. Taiho raised his head and looked directly into those ancient eyes. Most beings would have looked away. Most beings would have trembled. But Taiho had faced poverty and hunger and loneliness. He had buried his mother and raised his sister alone. He had learned that fear was not something to hide from. I am explaining, he continued. Where I come from, we do not have empires or thrones or crowns. We have families. We have neighbors. We have strangers we pass on the street who might be cold, who might be hungry, who might need someone to see them. He thought of the corridor on the station. He thought of Yuna's purple eyes, so lonely, so surprised when he offered help. Mother taught me that kindness is the only wealth poor people have. She made the coat I gave your daughter. She sewed it with her own hands even though she was sick. She died 3 months later, but she left me that coat because she wanted me to stay warm. His voice cracked slightly. I've worn that coat for 15 years. I have patched it and fixed it and kept it close because it was all I had left of her. The chamber was completely silent now. Even the nobles had stopped whispering. When I saw your daughter in that corridor, I did not see a princess, did not see someone powerful or important. I saw someone who was cold, someone who was alone, someone who looked like they had never had anyone give them something just because they needed it. Taiho paused. So I gave her my coat. I gave her the most precious thing I owned, because she needed it more than I did. Emperor Suhan's expression had not changed, but something in his eyes shifted. And now that you know who she is, do you want your coat back? Taiho almost smiled. Your daughter asked me the same question. My answer is the same. No, I do not want it back. Why? Because she still needs it. Taiho looked toward the crowd, searching for Yuna. He found her standing among the other royals. And even from this distance he could see the tears on her face. She is warm on the outside now, in this palace of gold and light. But inside, I think she has been cold for a very long time. I think this whole empire is cold. You have forgotten what it means to give without expecting something in return. A shock ran through the nobles. Some looked outraged. Others looked confused. A few, just a few, looked thoughtful. Emperor Suhan rose from his throne. He moved slowly, and the entire chamber held its breath. He had not left his throne during an audience in 300 years. This was unheard of. This was impossible. He walked down the steps toward Taiho. Each footstep echoed like the heartbeat of a giant. When he reached the floor, he stood directly in front of the human, towering over him, ancient and powerful beyond imagination. You speak of warmth, the emperor said quietly. You speak of kindness. You speak of giving without taking. His purple eyes were unreadable. These are children's words, weak words. The galaxy runs on power and strategy and the will to do what must be done. Taiho did not look away. But I have seen your empire. I have walked through your ships and your cities. I have seen how your people bow and hide in fear. I think your way of running the galaxy has left it very cold indeed. Silence. Complete, absolute silence. Then Emperor Suhan did something no one expected. He laughed. It was a small sound at first, rusty from centuries of disuse. But it grew and grew until it filled the chamber. The nobles stared in shock. They had never heard their emperor laugh. They had never known he could. When the laughter faded, Suhan looked at Taiho with new eyes. "You are foolish," he said. "You are small and weak and ignorant of everything that matters in this universe." He paused. "And yet you are also right." He turned to face the crowd of nobles, and his voice became the thunder again. "I have lived for 800 years. I've conquered worlds and destroyed enemies and built an empire that will last forever. But in all those centuries, I have never seen a soul like this one." He gestured at Taiho. He had nothing, less than nothing. And he gave it away to a stranger in the dark. The emperor looked back at Taiho. "Any species that can produce souls like yours is not primitive. It is precious. It is a treasure the galaxy has forgotten how to create." He raised his hand, and a wave of golden light spread through the chamber. "From this day forward, Earth and humanity are under imperial protection. Any who threaten them will answer to me personally. And my daughter Yuna is free to choose her own path. She is no longer a piece on a political board. She is her own person, to love or bond with whoever she wishes." Yuna broke from the crowd and ran toward Taiho. The nobles gasped, but no one moved to stop her. She crashed into him, wrapping her arms around him, the old brown coat spreading around them, both like wings. "Thank you," she whispered into his ear. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." Taiho held her back. This princess who had become his friend, his protector, his something that he did not yet have words for. "I did not do anything special," he said. "I just told the truth. That is what makes it special." Emperor Suhan watched his daughter embrace the human, and something softened in his ancient face. He remembered a time long ago when he too had loved without calculation, when he too had given without expecting return. Before politics and war and centuries of coldness had frozen his heart, perhaps he thought it was time for the Empire to remember warmth. Months later, Yuna returned to Earth with Taiho. She came not as a princess demanding service, but as an ambassador offering friendship. She lived in a small apartment near Hannah's university. She learned to cook human food and drink human coffee and laugh at human jokes that were not very funny.